Hi there everyone, and welcome back to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage YouTube channel. This is a Singer 401A, and it may not look familiar to you in particular. However, it is familiar to me because it is one of the 401s that I have restored. So I thought, gosh, this machine looks clean, and the reason is that I actually have worked on this machine in the past. The owner asked me if I would take a look. They have noticed that the bobbin winder is not functioning today the way it should. Now, these bobbin winders on Singers are relatively simple devices compared to some. Normally, of course, it sits in this position. When you are getting ready to use the bobbin winder, you simply flip this lever up, and then of course you loosen your clutch knob here in the center of your hand wheel, and you normally, of course, when you're using it with the foot pedal, as this wheel turns, the tire that is attached to the little shaft where your bobbin would be should also be turning, and as it turns, it should wind your bobbin. Now, notice if I push in on the lever, I get lots of turning, or should get lots of turning here, right? And it should be winding. But we have to sort of investigate this to see what might be happening with it. Now, it depends on what's going on. For example, let's do a little troubleshooting first. We're going to make sure that there is no oil. I don't think there is, because the owner of this machine is fairly familiar with it. And you'll notice that there is something here that I suspect what we have on the hand wheel is with the older bobbin winder tire, that's old rubber residue, although that would not necessarily stop the machine from winding the bobbin. And I say that because normally the issue with friction is if you have a situation where you have oil. Sewing machine oil is usually the thing that will cause bobbin tires not to participate. Before we're gonna check the hand wheel out, make sure that there's nothing on it that's stopping the friction of, because this is the new bobbin tire that I had installed on it. It may have been a year or more ago, I don't recall. Now, one thing we want to make sure of is that nothing has gotten on this bobbin tire shaft. Sometimes thread can work its way when a bobbin is being wound, and even experienced sewers like the owner of this machine, it can happen really quickly and you may not even see it. But thread is a sneaky thing. It can get into all sorts of places it doesn't belong, and that happens in part because sewing thread is essentially a very fine yarn, and of course, like all yarns, it has a twist in it, so it tends to have a mind of its own. So what am I doing? I'm taking this and I'm sort of just spinning, making sure that it seems to want to spin and move freely. I don't see any issues, none that I can see. I don't see anything, interrupting it. There's nothing pulling on it that I can tell, right? Because usually if the bobbin tire or the shaft stop, either something is binding it or it wants to turn, but there's unfortunately there is not enough friction between the rubber surface of the tire and the hand wheel. So we're going to look at this, and again, if it had been dropped or damaged, which I don't believe is the case, technically a shaft could get bent, but that's a very rare thing for a bobbin winder shaft, because it's actually in a pretty good place. So far I'm getting lots of nice spin there. So what are we going to do? Well, let's take it apart. So first thing you want to do is take your screwdriver. I have screwdriver bits that I prefer, as you all know, and I'm just going to, I don't even have to, there's not a lot of threads on these set screw for your clutch knob. So we'll just undo the clutch knob. Make sure you don't drop it. It's pretty heavy. You don't want to scratch it, and you don't want to scratch your machine. The lovely paint on this machine in particular. All right. Now if I if I don't want this to go anywhere, I can just turn it, and it should be fine. I oiled it when I overhauled the machine last, so it shouldn't be an issue. And then I'm going to go ahead and simply, don't forget you have a washer here. That's not the actual hub in the center, that's a washer. If you pull your hand wheel off without the washer controlled, it's going to go flying, and you don't want that. So let's just take that out, and you can still see you'll see the glistening of that fresh layer of grease that I applied. Again, greasing a hand wheel on a 401 is something you don't need to do every year, right? It's fine. It looks just as good as when I last serviced it. So let's see. I'm gonna take my parts here and kind of get them out of my way. I don't want them to fall, so I'm going to place them out of harm's way. Now, we're going to take a look at the actual mechanism. So basically what you have, you're going to have different parts that sit behind here, right? There's a clip and there's a spring. And this spring, when you adjust it, for example, you'll see that when you push it up, it doesn't flop down. That's because it's under tension. There is a spring in here, and you can pull it all the way up. And of course, if we had our bobbin on the shaft, it would stop somewhere right around there, and it should stay against the hand wheel. But it doesn't seem to have enough pressure. I mean, it has some, right? It's not just flopping all over the place, but it doesn't seem to have enough pressure to push against the hand wheel. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to tighten. There's a bolt here where you can see it. We're going to tighten it. We're not going to go crazy, but we want to see if it's loose or if it could use any tightening. Whoops. We don't want it. I don't want a screwdriver bit that's too wide. If I put one in that's too wide, then first of all, it may not seat properly, and I don't want to scratch the paint. So let's find one that is similar, that will go into it. That's too wide for the bolt. It's not too wide, but the bit itself is too wide. Let's see. Oh, that one should fit nicely. All right, so we're going to do that. We're going to take a look and see if, in fact, these things don't often need adjustment. They don't need adjustment often, but they can, right? In fact, this one, I'm going to loosen that just a bit, right? Now, as I loosen the bolt, right, it has less resistance, right? All right. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to snug it even tighter. And let's see if that made a difference. Now, I didn't actually have to tighten it that much. So we're going to see if that, in fact, makes any difference at all. I'm going to put my hand wheel back on. I'm not putting everything in yet because I know that the drive shaft should not turn because I don't have my clutch in there. Now let's push this all the way up. Okay. Now watch. Keep your eyes on the tire, and we want that tire to move. Okay. So it wants to move, sort of, but it's not moving consistently, right? It moves a little bit, but that's certainly not enough for what we need to do to be able to use the bobbin winder. Interesting. Okay, what's the next thing we want to try? Sometimes, and I recall this machine and I remember oiling it, sometimes bobbin winders don't get used as often as you might think. Now, as I say that, some of you say, oh, I use mine all the time. Some sewers have separate bobbin winding devices. They can be faster to use than trying to, set up and then unset the bobbin winding mechanism on your machine. And then some people just didn't sew very often and they had bobbins full of thread and they just picked whatever they had. So what am I going to do? There is a wonderfully easy to see. There's a hole here where, where's my little pointer here, right here, and that hole is there to, no surprise, add lubrication. So we're going to do that. I'm going to put one drop, just one is all I need, and make sure I don't have any excess, right? Because if I don't mop it up with my cotton swab here, I could end up with oil on my tire, and that is not something I want. If you get oil on the tire, you're going to have to take the tire off and clean it. Just imagine if you had oil, God forbid, underneath your the tires on your car, you wouldn't get much traction. Same thing is true even with something much smaller and lighter. Now I'm turning this, and as I do, that oil should begin to feed in the shaft. Now, one thing I am going to do, normally that hole should be fine to feed the shaft, but I'm going to go ahead on this side. Let's turn it a little bit better for you there. And I'm going to put, now make sure you know where, zoom in just a minute here. Let's make sure we know exactly where we're talking about. Where do I want to put oil? This is not where you normally would, but I'm going to try that. Notice that when you're trying to figure out what is turning against what here, for example, if I put the oil here, that's not going to do anything because that's not where that piece is turning with this piece. Okay, so that's sort of like a collar that helps your bobbin stay put. So we know that the space is between the beige painted steel and this steel. So that's where I want my drop of oil to go. Now, we really shouldn't need a ton of oil on this thing, right? It should be moving fine, right? Now it's already starting to move a little better. Now of course, I went through when I overhauled this machine, as I do with all of them, and I went in to make sure it was running, and I added oil to it. You will find that you don't have to keep putting oil. In fact, if I keep adding oil to this, we're just going to end up with a drippy mess, right? It won't necessarily hurt anything, but you don't want to have to make unnecessary cleanup jobs for yourself, because we want to make sure that this piece of our device is turning absolutely as best as it can, okay? That's something we definitely want to do. And again, the only way that you would have an issue with this would be if for some reason it turned out to be warped. But it would be extremely unusual. Now this, let's see how this is turning. Okay, it's interesting because when I turn this with my hand, it reaches a point where it doesn't totally stop, but it feels like I'm getting some resistance, and I don't really know why. It's a very curious thing. So I'm going to take the tire off. Maybe we can see more or not. What am I looking for? I'm trying to see if it's even possible, because this is a very tight area. I want to see if there's any chance of having a thread. I mean, even one piece of thread, if it gets in there, it can really create havoc. It's not a good time. Now this piece is, I believe it is attached with some form of rivet. So I'm not aware of how I might take that apart. So set our flashlight aside for a moment. What am I going to do? I'm going to take out one of those dental tools you've seen me use before. And the dental tools, if you recall, are great. I bought these at a flea market somewhere. These were new dental tools. They're fairly cheap, so I wouldn't necessarily want my dentist to use them. But here, what am I doing? I've got this very narrow pick. Okay, not only is it narrow, but it's actually very flat. So I'm going to basically just look to see, is there anything here that could potentially cause an issue? Yeah, something is binding here. It wants to stop. And it's there's plenty of sewing oil here. We don't need to add more oil. But the question is, why is it stopping? Now the next thing I can do is I can look at the hub that you normally put your bobbin tire on, right? So as I turn the bobbin shaft, watch this wheel, or the hub, right? We'll call it a wheel. And you can watch the two sides of the rim, and they should not really be wobbling or moving. Not really seeing any. Sometimes if you see something wobble, then you think, okay, it's been bent or it's out of alignment of some sort. So, so I'm turning. Something is wanting to catch. Now, normally, if you have old grease or something that's gotten solid, normally it just the whole rotation is slow, right? And then it gets better and better. And of course, we want to make sure that our tire is not too wide, because if it was, it might actually start to bind up against this section of the lever, and we don't want that either. So let's just pretend. See, right here it's binding, and I cannot figure out why. So strange. Then sometimes it doesn't, right? Now, I'm not finding any thread. I can't seem to. I'm not seeing any, and this is a very, very tight spot. So if I have thread, how would I even know I had it, right? How could I possibly, in order to get the thread out, you have to know you have some. And again, thread can be very hard to see. I had an owner of a FOF that I ended up spending hours getting the thread off, and she's a very experienced sewer. She knew the machine well, but you couldn't see. The thread had gotten into the shuttle of her FOF machine, but she didn't know it was there because you couldn't see it. And she wouldn't be expected to see it. I had to go in there and really hunt with a flashlight. It took me quite a while before I could figure out what in the world was happening. This is a very odd, right? So I'm turning it slow, barely moving it, and I want it to turn. I don't want it to bind or slow down, because if it does, it'll stop. And even though I have the full, I have tightened this spring. The spring should not be worn, and because it holds. So it really, it's not having to jam against the hand wheel. Just being up against the hand wheel with a rubber tire should be enough to make everything happy once again. And I'm not seeing that yet. So again, I've added more oil. Yes, let's turn. Turns fine. But when I put any kind of pressure on it, like say I'm pushing, let's say it's pushing against the hand wheel. Very odd, isn't it? Okay. If I push like this, right? You can't put too much pressure, because then it'll cause it to bind on its own. All right, well, we'll pop the tire back on for just a moment and see if any of my efforts have helped. If they haven't, then we'll need to look further. Again, I'm not worried about the clutch knob because it's already off, so it's not going to be engaged, right? Now look, I'm turning it, right? And it's still, you can see the tire will move, but not all the time. Now, what's our next option here? Well, you can take a look and see, right? I wonder if it's because the surface here is uneven. Now, this is not old oil. In fact, I remember cleaning this, but what we could be looking at is deposits of old rubber. And maybe that just did not get off. Maybe that's, maybe I missed that. I don't know. Interesting. So we'll try that before we do anything else. Let's see if we can make sure that it's not the surface of our hand wheel, because we've got a brand new nice rubber tire. It's nice and sticky like a new one should. And I can, before I do another test with this, I'm getting nice movement here. I can always just take some dishwashing liquid and wash off any oil that it might have. I don't think the owner of the machine has put any oil on the tire, and it doesn't really have any glisten or shine. But still, this is not wanting to turn like it should. I'm really not really sure as to why. Because none of our spring situation should be causing this, right? The spring is here. The spring has to do with the lever and how it's held against the hand wheel. But, I should always be able to turn. All right. There's a slight wobble here, but it's not that much of a wobble. It could just be the shape of the tire. What else could it be? I have put new oil in here, but could it be something else? Could it be, now again, I have no way of truly seeing if I've got thread in there. If I do, I do not see it. So what's another way we can try using some heat to see if it will stop this binding? Because if this thing is not turning perfectly all the time, it's going to cause it to stop. You don't have like massive pounds of pressure of this lever, and it's not needed. When this wheel is moving freely, it shouldn't. See, now it wants to bind, and it's not clear to me why it is binding. So we're going to have to, I may take out the heat gun, and I will maybe apply some heat. We want to do that very carefully. Okay, the last thing you want to do is cause any damage to the paint or to the device itself. Definitely want the rubber tire out of the way, but again, you don't need very high heat, just some heat. But again, heat is something that would help if we had, old grease or old oil that was gummed up. But I've got plenty of new oil in. Now, new oil doesn't always automatically fix these issues, but something is rubbing up against this. It's wanting to stop right there, and I'm really not sure as to why. So we're going to have to take a look at this and see what's going on with it. Yeah, because it's binding. It's not happy. It's not a happy winder at all. And I think that if we go and we remove again some of the old that beige stuff, there was some old basically gummed up old from the old tire that was originally beige. Singer ordered beige tires when these machines were new. But again, this is not a slick thing, and it really should not be causing this. I think our issue is here. When I turn this, sometimes it's smooth, but if I push pressure, it's wanting to stop. Interesting. Got to figure out, why is it binding on us? Just don't know at this point. All right. Now, if I'm unable to get this piece disassembled, and I don't think there is a way, if there is, I'm not aware of it, because again, there's no bolt at the center right here, right? That looks like it was put in under pressure in the factory. It may not have been designed to come apart. I know that this comes apart and there's a washer and a spring behind there, but that's not the most immediate concern. If we had an issue with the spring, or if someone had taken it apart and not put it back correctly, I could tell. There's a little hook on this washer that goes toward the left, and it's there. It is where it needs to be. We can take it apart, but I don't know that that's going to help us very much, because something here, now right now it's turning fine, right? No problem. And yet it should turn consistently. It really should not occasionally stop unless it's for one of the reasons I mentioned. So, all right, so we'll go ahead for good measure. We'll go ahead and make sure we've taken the old rubber off. But I really don't think that is going to make or break us here. I think there may be something else going on with this, and I'm really not sure. Now it's moving smoothly again, sort of. I want to see what's on the other side of this inner part of this rim. I literally don't see anything, but remember how narrow and tiny threads are, and really not sure. Because if there is a piece of thread in there, it's going to continue to create issues for us. We're not going to be able to, yeah, there it is. It wanted to hang up again. Why? It turns smoothly and then it doesn't. I just don't think this has been bent. Like I say, this is, of all the parts of a sewing machine, it's fairly well protected. Anything can be damaged when it's dropped, but I just don't see that. I really don't. I think if this thing had hit something, we'd see worse. We wouldn't get much movement at all. It would be bent a little worse than it is. But something is binding here, and I'm not entirely sure. But we'll go ahead and we'll get the old rubber mess off, and we'll see if that is of any use. I don't think it is, but we'll get it off anyway, and then we'll come back and decide. Again, I don't think we have issues with our spring. I think it's happy. I can tell it's nice and stiff. It loosens and tightens as it should, but there's something going on with this, and I am not unconvinced that we don't have a thread, a little fugitive thread piece somewhere that is causing a lot of issues that we really don't want. Anyway, hang in there, and we'll take a look at this hand wheel. Okay, everyone, we're back, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing here. I've got this is a cleaned, it's like a lid that I had to a jam jar or something, and I'm using it. It's made of steel, so you can use plastic. Just know that the plastic, you touch it the wrong way and it's going flying. So this will help us. And I've got, what I've got here, we've got cotton swabs. Get us a little bit better view. And I have put in liquid cleaner here. And what am I going to do with this? I don't need this to be anywhere near my Textilite gear, and I don't need it to be here. There's only one spot that the bobbin tire rubs against, and it's right there on that upper ledge. So I'm just going to come around here, and I'm just going to dab some of this on, and we'll just go around. I could also use some alcohol, and I'm going to try this first. This has an acid, a light acid, not a heavy acid. It's not extremely acidic. And I'll come around with it. I'm just going around the rim and getting it wet. We'll see what that does. Now, normally my go-to thing for cleaning paint finishes, not black finishes. Those black finishes you see on the older machines are very vulnerable. They are coated with a shellac clear coat, and you can really damage them with any solvent of any kind. So be extra careful there. So I'm just going to sort of let this sit. And this is a now I haven't really, you can see some of it already starting to come loose. What I'm trying to do is to make sure whenever you clean anything on a sewing machine, make sure that you have tested whatever it is. The last thing you want to do is cause harm. I have used this product before, but it depends on the machine. I might not use this on a black finish. The later finishes like this can also be damaged, and you have to be very careful and test in a discrete area. This is a fairly discrete area anyway, but you want to be sure that you're not causing any issues. So you can see from the beige that's coming off here, I'm actually getting some of this old rubber goo to dissolve. And you know, this is something I really want off of there anyway. I have not seen sewing machines. Typically what you see, you don't see this very often. You normally just see dirt, oil, and filth. And I went over this with, when I overhauled this machine, I went over it and cleaned off all the oil and any dirt that it had. But this this sort of rubber film is bonded to it, and I suspect at the time I did not want to damage the paint, so I took the more conservative approach. I have since found this product, and this product seems to not be harming the paint finish. And so if you see that I'm obviously pulling some of this up, but it's not exactly happening lightning fast, you will discover that when you're cleaning things on a vintage machine, speed is not your friend. It can be, you know, some folks don't have the patience for it. They're like, I am not going to sit here and take all of this stuff off. They just don't want to. Now there is another way you can try, because this is working, but you know, this will take you a while. So what I'm using this is Barkeeper's Friend, not the powder. This is the liquid. They make a lot of different products. Some hardware stores carry the whole line. Usually in the supermarket, what you'll see is just Barkeeper's Friend, and it's the liquid. It's a kind of cleanser, but it's liquid. They make a dry version, but I would not use that anywhere near a machine. You can't control it. The liquid version is a lot easier to control when you're trying to apply it. So some of this has come off. Now there's another way to take this rubber off. You often see me using, when I am doing cleaning, you will, especially with metal parts like nickel plated, steel parts, you will see me use 99% isopropyl alcohol. You never get that anywhere close to a black machine, and even machines like this that have a different kind of paint chemistry that Singer would use later, never use, if you use 99%, you're going to dull and start to strip the paint. You just are. Okay, none of these were all very high solvent paint finishes when they were new. However, what you can do is you can use a diluted form. I'm going to use 50% water and 50% isopropyl. And that, some of you have sometimes used that as a rubbing alcohol. That has less power. It should be enough power to clean the rubber residue off of here, but not so much as to harm the paint. The other thing to remember is that I find rubbing alcohols useful for all sorts of cleaning processes. However, they come in different concentrations. Don't just grab a bottle. You'll notice, like with this one, this is my 91. I use 91 or 99%. That's when I'm cleaning grease off of steel parts, non-painted. Do not use that on here. You have to know, the label will say it, or in this case, I created it. I had half a bottle of this and I put the other half water. So I have to remember, because you can't look at them and know. Always know what it is you're dealing with when you start dealing with solvents. Because you really can't tell. They just all look like they're clear, but you can have a very disappointing experience if you don't know. You're like, oops. Okay, so we're going to try this. Let's get us a little bit of a better angle here. Okay, so I'm just taking, again, my cotton swabs, nothing very abrasive, just a cotton swab. I'm going to do this and see. And yes, I'm able to bring up some of the old the old rubber residue here. But I am very skeptical that this is the issue. In fact, if anything, the old residue should have added to the friction. I don't think it's causing an issue with friction. And this could be, taking this residue off, it could be an exercise in futility. Because it's not, it's actually very grippy. If anything, it should help the tire grip. So again, if you have this situation and you just want that old rubber material off because for aesthetic purposes, sure, you can remove it. And it does the 50% alcohol, 50% water does not harm the paint in this area. That doesn't mean you should take 50% alcohol and douse your whole machine with it to clean it. Please don't do that. Okay, this is a conspicuous area, and I tested it before anything, and I'm pulling that off. The paint is staying, but the sort of dark beige color is not paint. That's the old rubber residue. Rubber is not what we might think of as an inert substance, right? If you remember your chemistry classes from years back, that means that it is over time. This took a long time. The chemistry of the rubber began to break down. Sometimes rubber, especially if it's exposed to heat, it will often crack, or people use the term dry rot, but what they really mean is that it has become brittle. And that can happen, but you can also have, and it's very strange, sometimes I get old machines and their original Singer tire, and it says Singer Co. on it, is still in good shape. It is incredible. Sometimes they are cracked and they crumble in your hand like a cracker, and then other times they're gooey. And I don't know enough about what different storage conditions would lead to a cracked tire or a gummy tire or a perfect tire. I can't tell you that. I'm not a chemical engineer, but I do know that any soft parts, basically bobbin tires and your electrical cords are typically the only soft parts you have on at least a vintage sewing machine. And these things can really over time, they're not like steel, right? They really are not designed. In fact, I'm amazed that they last as long as they do. And I have had, like I said, on a few occasions. In fact, I think on my very first machine that I ever overhauled, that 301 that you all see on my homepage, I think it had its original tire and it was nice and soft and squishy and worked beautifully. I think it's still on there now being used. So again, you can't always make assumptions about how these parts will degrade. A tire, thankfully, is not hard to find, at least for a Singer. You can get them. You can't necessarily get them in the original color, but you can't really be that picky. The fact that you can get Singer tires at all is wonderful. And again, it goes back to I've mentioned in a number of videos that one of the reasons I recommend to people, if you're just thinking about getting going in restoring vintage sewing machines, find you can see the old rubber is starting to let go of the hand wheel, and my paint looks fantastic. It's no worse for wear. But always, in spite of watching me do this video, never put any chemical solvent, I don't care what it is, other than sewing machine oil and a damp cloth. Always, before you use any cleaner, I don't care whose it is or what brand, whether it says natural or not, it doesn't matter. Do not put it on your sewing machine until you have experimented. One place to do it, you could do it, for example, on the back. It needs to be your machine, right? I knew that this 50% would be fine for this hand wheel, or I wouldn't have done it because this machine belongs to someone else. But try it in an inconspicuous spot. You can even go beneath the bed, right? The bed of the machine underneath, it'll be painted. And so if for some reason it causes your paint to fade or do anything like that, you're not really out much because it's underneath. And it doesn't really hurt the machine because the fact is aesthetics matter. And whatever your machine, whatever your personal aesthetic tastes are, people like having a machine that they think is attractive. They want it to be as clean as it can be, and the paint be in as good a shape as possible. And we all vary in terms of what we consider, patina, normal age wear, and then some people want to, you've seen these you've probably seen these online where people will literally have a machine repainted in new colors or whatever. If it's your machine, hey, you knock yourself out. You can do whatever you want. I am in the camp of wanting to conserve. I want the history of whatever the machine was, color-wise, that's what I want it to be. If it's a bright turquoise machine, like you see just behind this Singer there, that's how White made it back that was an early 60s machine. And so, yeah, sure, I have nothing against the bright colors, but Singer did not, they would do colors later, but Singer was not a company that normally took a lot of risks. Now they were innovative. Some people say Singer did not innovate, and I push back against that. I think Singer waited. They were not the first out of the gate, right? But I think they were very innovative. But anyway, if you decide you want to be exploring the restoration of vintage sewing machines, if you find a straight stitch, dedicated Singer sewing machine, and you can go, my gosh, you can go all the way back to the beginning of the 20th century, and you can keep going at least to around 1950. You got a half century worth of different models you can overhaul. And the Singers are designed to be simple to overhaul because Singer employed a lot of those service people back in the day, and they wanted their people to be productive. So they tried, and they would even improve designs over time. Even when the customer didn't notice, the employees did, because again, they were the ones needing to overhaul their people would have service contracts with Singer, and they would come out and tune the machines and basically keep them in good running condition for people. How often they would come, I'd have to research that. I don't know, but you can go online. If you see Singer sewing repair van or truck, you'll see the pictures from back in the day. They would show up. So all of this goo is coming off here. I wish that this was the solution, but this is kind of well, just in case. I really don't know that this is. You're probably asking yourself, well, why is he doing this, right? I like it to be clean, right? I don't remember this. I don't remember not doing this. It is entirely possible that I thought I had finished, and then someone asked to see the machine, and then I forgot, to be honest. But it's not hard. There's nothing. You don't need to go to a training school to do this. You just have to be careful. Again, anytime you see, and you might say, well, hey, if this sewing machine garage guy is doing it, I'll do it to my machine. Every sewing machine manufacturer, when they used paint, they may have had a slightly different chemistry, not dramatically different. And even if it's the same manufacturer, maybe you have a Singer and you want to, you're hoping to remove something from a paint finish. You say, well, it's a Singer. These companies like Singer were in business for generations, and they would occasionally update things like their paint process. But they didn't. It's not like they advertised it. It was an in-house thing. Most customers didn't care. They just wanted the machines to be durable and look nice. And I can't imagine too many people said, I need to know the chemistry of the paint before I buy your sewing machine. I just don't see that happening, right? That's a very nerdy, geeky thing for people like myself. Maybe you don't care either, but just remember, always, an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure is true, and especially when you're trying to clean something that has not been touched. You're trying to wake up a machine. You know, I've emphasized in many of my videos to always gently wake your machine up. Do not, try to rouse it too quickly. You can harm the machine, and you will be very disappointed with you'll be very frustrated with yourself when you realize that you were the reason that something broke because you were in a hurry, or you got frustrated and you said, well, by God, this machine's going to wake up. And and do not assume because these machines were built so well, and they were, that doesn't mean the laws of physics don't apply. I've talked to all of you so many times about plastics, right? Plastic knobs. There's no reason why an old vintage plastic knob cannot continue to work unless it was left in a sunny window for a decade. It can, but you've got to make sure that the steel that is behind it has woken up first. And then the plastic should, there can always be exceptions, but the plastic should, it should be okay. Unless it's already damaged, in which case, there are different ways I've talked about in the past trying to repair plastic, but it's not a fun task and not always successful. So you can see if you have made it this far in this video that I have now removed carefully, because I'm using a diluted alcohol, and if I used 99% isopropyl, this rubber coating would have been already removed, but I may have removed paint. Now, one thing to make sure to remember is that the manufacturers, even back in these days, when they would paint something, they would always make sure that the part that the customer saw was beautifully painted, plenty of coats, nice and shiny. Once you get onto the inner parts, like the inner hub here is fine. But I have seen as you go, in fact, you can see it here, you see as you get closer to the Textilite gear, the paint begins to fade until you actually see steel. That was intentional. That's how it left the factory. So if you ever see a part of your machine, it's usually not easily visible. You'll see this underneath a lot. You'll see what looks like even overspray. And there's nothing, that was just, the company understood that it wasn't necessary to completely polish and shine the underside of the machine. You just wanted it to have some kind of coating so that it was protected, even if it was, sometimes you'll see the metal showing through, and it's not really a quality issue. It's just, that's just how the production line would run. And given all of the oil and grease that vintage machines have by necessity because of their lubrication needs, and I've shown you all this even with things like, look at these are just nickel plated steel parts right here, and sometimes not even plated. And the old oil that they were coated in actually helps preserve them, because yes, it does get gummy, but without paint, that steel would be, worse off than it often is, because it had this old oil film that has been protecting it all these years. So I guess that's the silver lining when you're looking at old gummed up oil. It may cause you issues and you're having to get the machine to move again, but at least, because if it's rust, as all of you have seen, rust is a much bigger issue in trying to resolve problems than is old oil. Old oil is problematic. Oh yeah, but rust, gosh, that is a whole other ball game. So again, if you take the time to do what you're seeing me do here, do not be tempted. Don't break out the 99% and say, I don't have time, I'm just going to get this off here, because you will remove the paint. But so far I haven't removed any paint. You see the paint, and then there's a line that goes around. That's a line. What you're seeing here is it's a consistent line showing where Singer applied the paint. They would have had a prime coat, I'm pretty sure, and then they would have applied the paint, and they may have even had something they were using in the spray. They had to hold it still. So the paint chemistry on machines of this era, late 1950s, is different, right? I don't see decals or decals, depending on how you pronounce that word. I don't see those on these machines, nor do I see, now they may have had a clear coat, but if they did, I've never seen it. I don't think they did. Again, I don't have any kind of historical records. I can't open them up and look at what Singer was doing on their spray assembly lines in 1957, but I am of the mind that Singer had changed their paints to something different, because I find that once we get out of the era of those lovely black, we call them lacquer, I believe they may be some form of shellac. It's a black coating that is then covered. They would often put the decals on, and then they would put the clear coat over to protect the decals, and that's an extra coat. And I've shown in some earlier videos how that coating, when it fails, it might even look like old sewing oil, but it's actually, it has, the shellac has yellowed and is starting to fail. Shellac is gorgeous, and those machines, my goodness, if you ever see them, a shellac finish restored, they are incredible. They look beautiful, but they're not they're not as durable. And if you've ever owned any kind of lacquer and shellac are not the same thing, but they are cousins, if you want to think of it that way, in terms of finishes. And the reality is they are incredibly beautiful, but they are more maintenance intensive. They're not as robust. You have to be extra careful, and obviously they serve generations of people well on their Singer machines, and some people have actually restored those lacquer finishes. You have seen me basically, once I've cleaned a machine, especially those from that era of the black machine, that after I clean them, I seal them with sewing machine oil, or I buff them with sewing machine oil. And sewing machine oil is something that Singer knew would get on their paint finishes, and sewing oil should never harm a paint finish, because if you made sewing machines, you know, you had to know that that was going to happen. Okay, so there we go. Look at that. Okay, I've removed the rubber residue, and that you will notice that there's a line. Where's my pointer? If you start here on this ledge, okay, get a little closer, you're going to see what looks like a shadow line. Okay, that's not because I removed residue all over it, but you're going to see it's a consistent, looks like a little band, like a little gray band. That is from when the machines were originally painted. I have used alcohol 50%, no more, on this type of Singer finish from this era, and I've never had a problem. But again, do not assume that there wasn't a change. No matter what you see me do or say, you hear me say, please always try. I don't care if you have the same machine, because companies, when they change paint chemistry, they don't tell the customer, they don't tell us, and you can't see it. Trying to see what the chemistry of paint is when just by looking at the painted finish is not really going to work. Okay, it just isn't, and I mean, I know this from my own experience. Okay, so there we go. So as I told you all, I'm kind of skeptical that this is going to make a difference, but hey, we got the rim cleaned, and that's something that, again, you want oil and dirt to be off of your hand wheel, because if it's not, the reality is you're going to have friction problems with your bobbin tire. Okay, now, so just for good measure, we're going to try it. What do you think? I'm pretty skeptical. Before we try it, it would help if we put the bobbin tire back on. I'm even going to, I don't think I've got any oil on this, but just in case, I'm going to wash it in the sink with a little dishwashing liquid. Okay, we'll just put our tire back on here, and what does this tire say? Trying to make it out. It's not always easy to read what's on there. Okay, it still spins. It is, if there was any residue from my handling it during this video. All right, we're going to push this all the way up, okay? And the spring should hold it there. And I'm just going to turn. And as I turn the hand wheel, it seems to be moving, but it needs to move all the time. And is it? Now, if I hold it, right, it may, but even then, even if I push too hard, it's going to bind it, right? So, what's left? All right. So, my theory was, yes, we cleaned it. That's nice, but it didn't change. It did not change what's going on here. So as I turn this with the tire on, okay, I'm turning it. No. Okay, so we'll take the tire back off just to keep it clean. And in the next video installment, I'm going to show you how to disassemble the bobbin winding mechanism. It's wonderfully simple. It's one of my favorites. If I haven't, I'm sure I've mentioned it many times. Anyway, if you want to see how this disassembles and goes back together, we'll take a look. I'll inspect it. I really don't think this is our issue. I think something is binding this in, and I just don't think it's bent. I think something's keeping it from turning regularly, and I don't know why. It's very curious, but we will find out one way or the other. Thanks for watching, everyone.